All right, everyone, welcome back here. Today we're going to be analyzing the impact of word choices on tone and meaning. Our learning objective right here, analyzing the impact on word choices on tone and meaning. Uh, Very important, both fiction and nonfiction. The word choices that a writer makes has a large impact on how someone reads whatever it is that writer is writing. Um, if you're talking fiction, character development, plot development can very much be affected by word choices. If you're talking nonfiction, articles, or maybe that email you're writing to a boss, you want to make sure you have the right tone, your right meaning behind your words, so you're using the proper words there. All right, let's go ahead and get right into this then. We'll start actually with some definitions. And we'll start off the bat here with tone and meaning. So, first off, tone is the speaker's attitude towards the subject. So, this is how the writer is writing about that particular subject. Now, you have to remember, particularly in fiction, it doesn't mean that the writer truly believes those things. It could be how the character is perceiving something. Um, Next up, then, meaning is the author's message suggested by the word choices. Um, in nonfiction, this is hopefully very straightforward, easy to understand. However, once you get into fiction, we get into things like connotative, denotative meanings, figurative language plays a big part in this as well. So you have to look more closely at fiction than you hopefully do at nonfiction. Hopefully, that's just pretty straightforward. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into it, do some work together on tone and meaning within some fiction to start us off. This section here from The Great Gatsby. So in this section, I would obviously read through this and have the students pay particular attention to the highlighted or different colored words here throughout this section. Once I finish that, then we would go right on. Okay, first off, then, we have two neighborhoods that were presented in this particular section from the Gatsby. First is the West Egg neighborhood, and then the other one not named, but the neighborhood on the right of the West Egg neighborhood. Now, the West Egg neighborhood, the words that were used to describe this neighborhood right here, the less fashionable, and a house was described as an eyesore. All right, so right off the bat, just taking a look here at the words used to describe this particular neighborhood, it's pretty obvious that our tone here is not great, right? Dispiriting is the one used here, which I would definitely agree with dispiriting. Um, Gloomy, um, anything like that would probably work. We then have kind of the polar opposite here with the neighborhood on the right, which is described as a colossal affair. There's a description of the raw ivy, and finally, the white palaces of fashionable. So, all these words here being used to describe this neighborhood on the right suggest a tone that's uplifting, right? Sophisticated might be another way to describe these particular places. So if you put that together, the tone being used to describe the West Egg neighborhood, and then the tone being used to describe this other neighborhood, if you put those two ideas together, we can tell that what the author here is doing is suggesting a contrast between the two, right? The not so wealthy neighborhood of West Egg and obviously the affluent neighborhood here described in the contrasting neighborhood that's on the right. Okay, next up then, a couple words here being used shocking and horrified. So, which meaning could be suggested by these tones? Shocking, horrified. I would probably give a couple minutes for the students to come up with an answer here for these before uh, revealing our answer here. Man's behavior is often less than human. Definitely not the beauty nature inspires to success if we look here at our words being used, shocking and horrified. Uh, okay, next up then, we would get into a little bit of group work. So in this section, I would have students partner up with their already established partners and start off by reading through the selection here presented, and then talking through their two questions here, the first two. So the first being, what is the tone about the sailor group that surrounds someone? Next up, then the second one, the tone about the superior figure. Both presented here kind of in the latter half of the reading section. But I would have them discuss, come up with an answer together for these first two. And then once everyone is done, I typically like to use things like the online hand raising in a Google Meet or something along those lines. But then once everyone's done, we would then go through and talk about the words that kind of get us to these tones. So starting with the first question here, what is the tone about the sailor group that surrounds someone? The two kind of descriptions they give is that these people would flank or act like a bodyguard surrounding these people. And we get to our answer here, which is disdain, right? Obviously, we're not talking about lonely here, and they are not surrounding them. I know sometimes we see bodyguard here, right? We think of president or something like that. But in this case, that's not the meaning at all, right? This is more of a surrounding them, but not in an admiring way, right? Like a bodyguard might for a president or something like that. This definitely sort of drips here with disdain. We then get to our second set of words here that go along with the second question. What is the tone about the superior figure being talked about here? And our two sections we have here are moving along with them like Aldebaran and among the lesser lights of his constellation in our description here, which is talking about here the constellation Taurus. So when we're looking at these two words, definitely awestruck, right? We look up at the stars typically in an awestruck fashion, not in one of frustration or disapproval. Okay. Finally, then, our third question here. For this one in particular, I would probably have students come up with answers to this one on their own. Question asking, how does the author's word choices impact the meaning? This would be a written response. So I would probably want students to first come up with ideas on their own, what they feel about this. And then once both have done that, then maybe share their answers afterwards to see if they're kind of on the same page or maybe not. Then, having had them do that, we would go through and kind of reveal here. The word choices suggest that there is a sailor among the sailors who is widely seen as very well respected, someone that people would look up to here. Okay, and that would probably end this section, or I guess the kind of collaborative section that I would have set up. For a more independent work, then, I would probably transition to something along these lines, something like a quizzes, and have them work through a quiz specifically on analyzing word choice or reading particular sections, and then maybe some multiple choice to go along with that. Okay, the great thing too about this particular program is that when you're talking about differentiation, this allows students to take the quiz multiple times. I can have a specific threshold that they need to meet before they have passed or are allowed to go on to anything else within the lesson. And it'll also show me how many times it took them to get there, right? So if takes a student 2 or 3 times, maybe that's showing a mastery eventually. But if a student is taking 5, 6, 7, 8 times, we probably need to go back, revisit the lesson, because are they really getting it? Or at that point, once you're into the 7, 8, 9 times on the same quiz, is it just gotten to the point where they are just guessing, right? And then eventually they get to whatever threshold, the 80%, whatever that might be for that particular lesson. So this is a good way of tracking, monitoring kind of in real time where the student is. Are they progressing? Are they stagnant? Those sorts of things.